Is this the greatest movie character of all time? Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is James and today we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones. Now, if you don't know me, which a lot of you don't probably, Indiana Jones is probably in my top 5 favorite movie characters of all time. He is, to me, maybe the coolest movie character of all time, but the reason why I love him is because he's an action star, but he doesn't have all the massive muscles. He was an action star back in the 80s. You could watch it and anyone could be Indiana Jones. Obviously, I'm not in my normal setup here because I am not I'm not in the U.S. I'm in England seeing my family. And so that's why I'm not in my usual setup. But so today, with the Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny coming out on June 30th, in just under 2 weeks now, I thought it would be the perfect time to talk about the Indiana Jones franchise and why I love this franchise and the character of Indiana Jones. To give you a bit of backstory on my experience with Indiana Jones, at the age of 3 or 4, I was introduced to Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first Indiana Jones film, and all I knew it as was Indiana Jones. So whenever I wanted to watch it, I would just call it, can we watch Indiana Jones? Because I had a common thread and I had a common theme in my younger life where I would watch the first film and then I'd love it so much that I wouldn't have any interest in watching the sequels. That happened with Spider-Man and that happened with a couple other franchises, especially the Star Wars prequels where I had no idea they existed. I have loved this character in this franchise since I was 4 years old. And over a decade later, I still love it. To me, this is easily one of the greatest trilogies ever made. The first one is an absolute classic. And the second one is a great action film with a lot more flaws, but it's still a great film. And then the third film is one of the greatest conclusions to a trilogy ever made. And then the fourth one is okay. So this has always been one of the strongest franchises out there. And arguably that's because of its character. And I've always loved that character, and I've always loved these stories. These are arguably the quintessential adventure films and the quintessential action films. So this franchise has a very special place in my heart. I don't know if I would have the love that I do for film if Indiana Jones didn't exist. And so with this new film coming out, I really wanted to talk about this film because this may be the perfect time and the last time that I might have a good chance to talk about these films. So starting off from the beginning, back in 2010 or 2011, I was 3 or 4 years old, and I remember being sat down with my dad and we watched this new movie called Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, as I called it. It was just called Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I adored it. It introduced me to this whole new world of action and chases and romance and music and comedy and everything. And I fell in love. But my dumb brain thought it was recent, and so when I found out it was released in 1981 and there were sequels, I watched all those and loved all of them as a kid. As time has gone on, I have lost a lot of appreciation for Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, but I still don't think it's as bad as a lot of people claim it is. So, why do I love this franchise? Well, the reason for that is, as I mentioned earlier, the character of Indiana Jones. He's this action star that you buy him as an action star, but he's not ripped. He's got muscle, but he's not like Arnie or Sly, where they're just ripped and they're just hulking muscle machines. He's strong, but he uses his brain, he uses his wit. That's what makes him exciting. I've always loved that about these films. From there, this is just one of the greatest franchises at performing action right. With every single different film, you have different kinds of action. In the first film, it's a lot of fist fights because they had a lot lower budget. And it's a lot of fist fights and shootouts. In the second film, you got massive set pieces like the roller coaster ride, as I like to call it. You got the bridge at the end. You got the spike room in the middle of the film. You've got people getting hung. I mean, you got shoot car chases, which there's one and a couple, which there's a bunch of great car chases throughout this entire franchise. I love everything about this franchise. And there's a reason why there's never been a franchise, including Pirates of the Caribbean, which I think is the other great adventure franchise for a little bit, for the first two films. There's never been a franchise that has come close to doing an adventure like Indiana Jones. Obviously, you couldn't have had all this fantastic elements of these films without the one and only, maybe the greatest filmmaker and storyteller of all time, Steven Spielberg. He is arguably, I mean, there's a debate that says he's the only person that could direct a Indiana Jones film. We'll see when Dial of Destiny comes out in a couple of weeks. But Spielberg throughout the late 70s, and especially the 80s, and all the way into the 90s, and arguably the early 2000s, just had this way of bringing the sense of magic and wonder to the screen. Where that Steven Spielberg magic and that sprinkle of fairy dust is like none other. Like, no one can do it like Spielberg. Where he's a problem solver. And so you hear about them talking about how they had a lot of flaws and they're trying to make it, and how he problem solved and made a better shooting schedule than the studio came up with. And every single one of these films, even Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, has a bit of that Spielberg magic, because you can tell that he cared about this character and cares about this story. And he is the main reason, arguably, why this franchise has worked for so long, and why this franchise is so loved. And he can shoot action like no one else. He is one of the best people in the world at shooting action. He's up there with Cameron and some other directors. He's great. And that is what I've always loved about this film, of that just childlike wonder every time I watch these movies. Talking more about the actual characters of Indiana Jones, he's such a fascinating character. The reason for that is because he's a scumbag. And in times, he's a piece of shit. He's shouting at women. He's essentially robbing people in times. He talks about how he bought Short Round, which is kind of just messed up. And he's in some ways doing all these terrible things. He's womanizing. He's a womanizer at times. But for some reason, you always buy into him, and you always kind of like him. And you're never really sure why. You never are. And that's what I've always loved about that character, is you don't know why you love him, apart from the fact that Harrison Ford plays him absolutely perfectly. Harrison Ford arguably has the two most iconic characters in movie history, in Han Solo and Indiana Jones. And the way he plays this character with that suave nature is fantastic. And in every single film, he's got a great relationship with these characters. In the first film, he's got a great relationship with Marianne and Sala. In the second film, Short Round. In the third film, Sala and his father. In the third film, I think that that scientist guy and his buddy that betrays him, and arguably Shia LaBeouf and still Marianne. I think that the reason why he's become such an incredibly well-known character is because of Harrison Ford. And no one would, if it wasn't for Harrison Ford, we would not know Indiana Jones like we do today. Another interesting thing about why I think he's so incredible is Harrison Ford originally wasn't going to play Indiana Jones. Originally, the role was offered to a little-known actor named Tom Selleck. And Tom Selleck was supposed to play the main role of Indiana Jones, and I actually think he would have been perfect. And essentially, he had a show coming up at the time that he had already signed the contract with, and so he couldn't back out. He wasn't allowed to. It was in his contract. And so he essentially was called, I think it was Magnum P.I. He was called, so Lucas essentially called up his old buddy, Harrison Ford, and said, "Hey, we want you to play this character, and no one else. We can't see anyone else but Harrison Ford in this role." I remember when Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilm, they were talking about doing another Indiana Jones film, and and I'm glad they shut that down and decided to go with the fifth film, because Disney is Disney. They're greedy. They'll do whatever the fuck they want. So if they want to make another Indiana Jones movie, they will make one. But I respect the hell out of them that they decide to stop production and everything on that and finding a new Indiana Jones and just say, you know what, we know we're going to do another one, but we're doing it with Harrison Ford because he is the only person that can play that role. And I love that. And so it's so fascinating to look at how we can't see anyone in that role. He originally wasn't going to play Indiana Jones. And it's only by coincidence that he played Indiana Jones. In all of these movies, there's always a great supporting cast. In the first film, you have Sala, and you have Marianne, and you have, I think, Arnold Toth. I think that's his name. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And all of those are great villains and great side characters, where they're just so despicable. For the villains especially, they're so despicable that you just love to hate them. And so, yeah, I've always loved all the side characters, mostly. Marianne is one of the great love interests in a movie of all time, because she's a badass, but she's also got that feminine style where she is killing people. She's drinking and she's getting drunk and she's like fainting because she's so drunk. She's watching people get massacred. She's getting kidnapped. And when I mean getting massacred, at the end, she's like standing by people just getting obliterated. She kills people, she shoots people, she makes fun of Indy, she punches him, she hits him. She doesn't take any shit. But she uses her feminine nature to get what she wants. Of when she's been taken and she's drinking with the main villain, and she knows that she can outdrink this guy and that she can trick him, and it almost works until Arnold comes along. It almost works. And so I love all the side characters. Sala is one of the great sidekicks of all time. He's just such a, you just want to give him a hug. Like he's awesome. And then in the second film, you have Short Round, who once again is one of the greatest sidekick characters in movie history. He's just, and it was so great to see Ke Huy Quan win the Academy Award, this most recent Oscar Academy Award ceremony. But anyway, he's great. Then obviously in the third film, Last Crusade, one of the best duos and some of the best action movie dialogue in cinematic history is between Sean Connery and Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones Sr. Those two's chemistry is fantastic. And George Lucas has said that film was saved by that chemistry and by Sean Connery. I don't believe him because I think that film would have been good either way. Sean Connery raised that film almost a full star. Then, obviously, in the later films, you have in Kingdom Crystal Skull, you have Marianne come back and you have the kind of person that betrays Indiana Jones. And I've always liked him in the film. I don't think he's great, and that film obviously has the least amount of incredible characters. But there's always just something about these side characters that has always worked well, and that's always been some of my favorite elements of this franchise. I've also always loved the elements of the supernatural and the realistic in this franchise. This franchise has always, apart from Kingdom Crystal Skull, has always done a really good job of mixing the supernatural side with the realistic side. Where on one hand, in the first film, you've got a ark sent down from God. In the second film, you've got stones that have the power of some god or whatever. I've always been a little iffy on the stone thing from Temple of Doom. But it gives people life or something. Whatever, just fuck it. Um, in the third film, you have obviously the Holy Grail. And in the fourth film, you have Aliens, the Crystal Skull. Every single one of these films, apart from maybe Crystal Skull, but even then I think Crystal Skull gets a bit too much hate. While I do agree with a lot of the complaints, I'm going to say that a lot in this video. All of them have supernatural elements, but they all somewhat base themselves in reality, where you can believe them somewhat to what they're going for, where it doesn't feel like it's a stretch of your imagination, where you could believe some of this stuff. And all of that is because of the somewhat realistic action. Now, of course, Indiana Jones gets beat up a lot in this franchise. He goes through a lot of shit. But I would argue it works, and how he does a lot of stuff that is so unbelievable in this franchise, it works because he gets the shit beaten out of him. In the first film, he's bleeding all over the place. In the second, he's getting shot. There's that truck scene, he's getting punched in the arm where he's just been shot. In the second film, he's getting tortured by voodoo. In the third film, I mean, he's just getting abused throughout this franchise. But I think that's kind of what makes it work. Obviously, in King of the Crystal Skull, they did go a bit too far with the aliens, where it was like, okay, I can't believe that there's aliens in Indiana Jones. No one's going to believe that. But you know what? Like, it still has some elements in parts to reality. And I've always loved those elements of these films, how they're able to mix the supernatural element with the reality. And that's something that I really hope they nail in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. I really hope they don't go too far. There's rumors that there's going to be it seems like there's going to be something involving time travel in this film. And I don't know how that's going to work out. I really don't. I don't know if I'm going to watch that and be like, that works with Indiana Jones, and I buy into it. Or if I'm going to watch it and be, this is stupid, they've made decisions that I just can't attach reality to, and these are worse decisions made than King of the Crystal Skull. I don't know. I genuinely have no idea. But I really hope that they can keep that reality with that supernatural element. That's the same thing that they've been able to keep mostly since 1981, when Steven Spielberg brought us that first masterpiece. And while I'm very excited about this film for Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, I also really hope that they keep those elements. And I have a feeling they won't. And rewatching this franchise over the last few weeks, where we've had, in the past few years, past decade, we've had a lot of movie franchises go off and do spin-off movies, where you have one film that's the mainline films, and you've got to do a spin-off. And a lot of films, it feels like they're made to just set up spin-offs. I have always loved the fact that these films were never made to set up spin-offs or other films. They were always focused on Indiana Jones and that crew. And because of that, I love it. And so, the fact that we never got a solo film, I don't care. The fact that we never got a young Indiana Jones film, I would have been fine with that, because it's still focused on Indiana Jones and that character, and maybe we would have been able to get a bit more of Sean Connery. But even then, I don't think that was necessary. And we never got a Marianne sequel, and I like that. We never got a short round spin-off. I like that. I've always had a lot of appreciation for those older franchises, that they didn't decide to go off and do all these bullshit spin-offs that aren't very good very often. Like Rocky didn't have any spin-offs until Creed, which is fantastic. And that's a very rare example. Star Wars was not a spin-off thing until arguably until the sequel trilogy. But if you want to go earlier, the prequels. The Planet of the Apes movies from the 60s and 70s. Those didn't set up spin-offs. They never did. The Pirates of the Caribbean movies, even going back to the early 2000s, they never set up spin-offs. Lord of the Rings, there's been no talk about an Aragorn spin-off or an Elrond spin-off or Legolas spin-off. Nothing. Gandalf spin-off. And so I love the fact that this franchise has had 40 plus years of existence, and there's never been a spinoff. I love that. Overall, guys, if you can't tell, I adore this franchise. This is easily probably in my close to my top 10 favorite movie franchises of all time, and it's easily in my top 5 favorite trilogies of all time. This is one of those franchises that I hold so dearly, and while I'm I have a lot of skepticism about this new film, I am also very excited because I think the possibilities of sending this character out is a great idea. And so, who knows? I won't be able to see it until probably July 4th or July 3rd because I will still be on my trip and I won't get back in time. But I really hope that they knock our socks off, or at least don't disappoint us. And they keep some of that magic. And they keep what we love about this character, which is just everything about him. And I don't want Indiana Jones to get that Logan treatment. And even though I love Logan, I don't want that for him. I want him to ride off into the sunset. I don't want this to be the Halloween ends of this franchise. I don't want this to be the Rise of Skywalker of this franchise. I don't even want this to be the mediocre films in the Hobbit franchise. I just want this to be a good film. Because I just hope that it's good, and I hope it doesn't betray us. And because that would crush me. This is a character that I've loved since I was a little kid. And there are very few characters in franchises that I have so much love for. And I just hope that they can succeed. And I hope for the best of this franchise and this film. And even if this is the end for this character, which it probably is, or at least for another decade, it's been a good ride. And while we've had our ups and downs, more ups and downs, thank God, it's kind of surreal looking back at my life, kind of, where this has been a character that I've loved for so many years. And it could all be gone within a splash. And it could be gone in less than 2 weeks. And all of that I've loved for so long. I don't know. I'm really worried, but I'm super excited. This is going to be a really bittersweet film because knowing this is going to be the last time we see Harrison Ford on screen as Indiana Jones breaks my heart. But I also know it needs to happen. And I hope that this film is good. I hope that it can send it off in a good way where we just leave this character alone. Because there is no one in the world that can play Indiana Jones apart from Harrison Ford. And I swear to God, if Disney fucks it up and they greenlight a spinoff or a sequel or a Phoebe Waller-Bridge movie, I'm dropping with Disney. I can't take it because that is a betrayal. This franchise doesn't need any more. And you are just milking it at this point. Even more than you have. There's nothing more I can say. And if they do that, I will drop Disney. I will probably stop watching all their stuff, all their little stuff. I won't watch as much MCU anymore. I won't watch it anywhere as much Star Wars. Because I will lose all respect for them. Sorry guys, that got a little emotional towards the end there. But please let me know below what you thought of Indiana and what you think of the Indiana Jones franchise. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Are you one of those people that grew up with it like me? Or did you see all the movies in the theater? Have you never had the respect for it where you've been introduced to it and you're like, it's okay, but it never was some of my favorite movies? Let me know in the comments below. I'll try and get reviews out for the other films in this franchise. before the new one. I'll try. It might not happen. It's just going to be really busy. And I'll try and get my review out for Dial of Destiny as quickly as possible, but that also might not happen. Going to be really busy. And then I'll try and do a ranking as soon as I see it, after I review it. But if I don't, thank you for watching this. And this is one of my most important videos. So thank you for sticking with it. And as always, I'll see you guys later. Bye.